ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Mina Nutbeam, the Program Manager for the CORES program at SAFE, also known as Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future. If you're less familiar with us, CORES is a certification that recognizes owner-operators and third-party providers that have developed a robust commitment, capacity, and competency in providing resident services coordination and affordable rental homes. We know that to fully recognize the benefits of service-enriched housing, it's really important that resident voices and priorities are at the center of this work, and that we ensure that residents are empowered in their decision-making about their lives, their homes, and the services they receive. We know that more often, housing organizations and resident services providers are shifting their service model to be more person-centered, and for many, this includes incorporating coaching models to support resident empowerment and self-sufficiency. Coaching models can be implemented in a variety of programs and impact areas while focusing on mentorship, goal setting, and empowering residents. In today's webinar, we will be exploring different resident and family-centered coaching models and peer support opportunities that have been implemented and integrated as part of resident services delivery by two core certified organizations, the Community Builders and Operation Pathways. We will also learn about EMPath's Bridge to Self-Sufficiency, a theory of change and program model that uses a comprehensive approach to promote upward economic mobility by helping families plan, reach, and sustain their personal goals. EMPath has collaborated with TCB to integrate this model into their service delivery, while Operation Pathways has implemented the family-centered coaching model, which we'll hear more about today. Alexandra, can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So just to kick us off, some quick logistical items. Go ahead, and if you haven't done so already, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat or share any resources. Today's webinar and slides will be made available after the webinar, and links will be shared in the chat as well. Please use the Q&A function for questions, and we'll make sure to hold time at the end for questions and discussion with our panelists. So I'm happy to go ahead and introduce our wonderful guest presenters today. So joining us is Ishmael Reinhardt, who serves as the Financial Programs Coordinator for the Community Builders, or TCB, in Richmond, Virginia. Prior to TCB, Ishmael served as a HUD Certified Housing Counselor for 4 years with Housing Opportunities Made Equal of Virginia and the Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America, where she assisted low to moderate income residents to help them prepare and qualify for homeownership. Ishmael holds the Neighbor Work Center for Homeownership Education and Counseling Certification and is a certified housing counselor with the Virginia Association of Housing Counselors. Next, we have Jennifer Lowe, who serves as the Vice President of Shared Learning and Member Networks at Economic Mobility Pathways, or EMPath, in Boston, Massachusetts. In this role, Jennifer leads the organization's Economic Mobility Exchange, which is a global member-based learning network representing over 1,000 nonprofit organizations and government agencies seeking to disrupt poverty in their community using EMPath's mobility mentoring, holistic coaching approach, and tools. Jennifer previously provided oversight and strategic direction of EMPath's Outcomes Initiative and research projects and has authored several reports, including Social Networks as an Anti-Poverty Strategy and others. And prior to joining EMPath, Jennifer served as the Associate Director of the Boston-based civil rights nonprofit Organization for New Equality, where she oversaw financial education and match-saving programs designed to reduce racial disparities, and has years of experience in project management and direct service working with families experiencing homelessness. Jennifer has served on the Executive Council of the New England Sociological Association and was a board member for the Midas Collaborative. Kevin serves as the Deputy Executive Director of Operation Pathways and is the Assistant Vice President of Resident Services for the NHP Foundation. He oversees the development and execution of programs, services, and key stakeholder relationships across the NHP portfolio. This includes the cultivation, maintenance, and evaluation of third-party collaborations, portfolio-wide program initiatives, grant-funded programs, and partnerships. Kevin has over 2 decades of professional experience in human services management, resource development, and organizational assessment and evaluation. He has held several leadership positions at various organizations, including Operation Pathways, Big Brothers Big Sisters of America, and various community-based committees and boards. Kevin has been recognized for his work by the United Way, WBRZ Channel 2, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and the White House Office of Faith and Community-Based Initiatives, as well as Louisiana State University Center for Community Engagement, Learning, and Leadership. So welcome everyone, and we're really excited to get started. I will go ahead and pass it over to Jennifer to start us off.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to share with you today. I'm going to be giving a very high-level overview of EMPath's holistic economic coaching model called mobility mentoring. It's an approach that can be used to partner with residents in their economic mobility goals. But before I do, I'd like to first share some of the why behind the mobility mentoring model. So over 15 years ago, we were inspired by research that was coming from the field of, I'll say brain science. So it collectively, think about like neuroscience, behavioral science, psychology, et cetera. And it was demonstrating that the impact that trauma and chronic stress, particularly like the stressors that are experienced with scarcity, such as living in poverty or having unstable housing or food insecurity, violence, what that has on that impact that has on our executive function skills. So our ability to be able to regulate our emotions, to be able to plan, organize, problem solve, and really persist towards our dreams and our goals, all these skills that are critically important to be able to get ahead and to be able to thrive in life. So as we learned from our partners, such as Harvard's Center for the Developing Child and others, we wanted to be able to put this research into action. And so EMPath, we think of ourselves as an action tank where we get to learn from the research in the field and operationalize it. We directly try to bring it into the community by incorporating what we've learned into our coaching approach and tools and our policy work. So the good news is that although EF skills can be impacted by chronic stress and scarcity, trauma, they can be supported and they can be strengthened over time. And our mobility mentoring coaching model is really intentionally designed to be able to support accessing those EF skills. So on this slide, you'll see a more formal definition of mobility mentoring. It is the holistic EF or executive function informed coaching approach that we use and that organizations that are part of our learning network use. And it also is combined with those accompanying tools to support people towards their economic mobility goals. And so as you see on the screen here, mobility mentoring has 4 essential elements: coaching for economic mobility, the bridge to self-sufficiency, or I should say that we're actually in the process of renaming it to the economic mobility bridge, goal setting, and then finally recognition. And all of these 4 essential elements are supported by continuous improvement, really making sure that we recognize that good mobility mentoring requires this continuous learning and reflection, both in practice and in data. Next slide. So I'm going to go through each of these 4 essential elements briefly, just to give you a good sense of mobility mentoring model or approach. So the first element is coaching for economic mobility. Throughout our work, that coaching approach is really used to promote a partnership between, I use the term coach and mentor interchangeably, and participant. So when I think of the housing sector and how this is applied in the housing sector, we tend to see this relationship as a partnership between residential service coordinators and residents. And so at the core of this mobility mentoring coaching relationship, we believe that people are the experts of their own lives, right? That they're resourceful and capable of achieving goals. We want to be able to support people in visioning what's possible for themselves, their family, long-term. We want to make sure that coaches are aligning what we call their coaching compass by making sure that they're upholding and supporting a growth mindset, really understanding that everyone has that potential for growth and learning, as well as fostering high expectations. So fostering high expectations, not only in ourselves as coaches or mentors, but also in the people that we serve. And we do this by making sure that we're challenging people to help create those stretch goals, to help grow beyond what they even thought might be possible for themselves. Coaches hold unconditional positive regard for, and the belief that there's an innate human value for those we serve. And they're trained up in being able to bring an understanding of trauma-informed practices into the coaching relationship. And then I would say finally with coaching, the value, coaches really try to bring in this value of a very deep self-awareness, insight, resilience, cultural humility, respect for diversity, sensitivity, and really an awareness of their own personal biases into that relationship. I often feel like that special sauce of the mobility mentoring model is this coaching relationship. It's very important. And it really, I think, is what drives and propels the other essential elements that I'll get into in a moment of the model. And so I put the quote that you see on the screen. This is from one of our more recent participant feedback surveys. And I think it helps to really capture the value of a coaching relationship, really having someone in your life that believes in you, that can help motivate you, help you stay focused on your goals. And well, I say that the coaching relationship really defines our approach, and I think it is the special sauce in a lot of the work that we do. This relationship combined with those three other essential elements, the bridge, goal setting, and recognition together will create mobility mentoring. So on the next slide, you'll see our bridge to self-sufficiency. It is probably very small on the screen. So I'm going to pop into the chat a link where you can download it. We have it available in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. So if you wanted to download it and look at it. But the bridge to self-sufficiency, it is our tool that was really designed as an illustration of EMPath's theory of change. So through research, we were able to identify these 5 key domains of people's lives that need to be optimized to increase economic mobility. So you'll see family stability is split into housing and family, right? Making sure that housing is stable, and family, we're making sure that we're tending to folks in our network. Well-being, which is broken down into physical and mental health and social networks. Financial management, which is debt and savings, and then education training, and then finally employment and career. And so we evolved the bridge as a theory of change to actually become a tool that we use in direct service practice with residents. So it's meant to be used as a conversational tool for people to self-assess where they are today and to begin to consider where they want to go and what are the strategies to help them get there. And if you take a look at the bridge, it's really designed to support our executive function skills. It's contained on one page and is holistic in its description of those key areas needed to focus on for economic mobility. So in this way, we think that the bridge helps to support metacognition, right? That ability to see the forest through the trees. It allows us to kind of take a step back and see that big picture mapped out and understand how each domain is interconnected. One example I think of this is like if I'm a resident that has been late with my rent, I might want to work with my coach to be able to create a goal of paying my rent on time, right? So that my housing is stable and I'm not vulnerable in that housing pillar. But if you look at the bridge and as I'm engaging in a conversation with my coach, I also might come to appreciate that, well, housing and getting rent paid on time is my goal. My strategy might actually be supported by creating educational goals or career goals to maybe improve my education status or get a certificate or an associate's degree, bachelor's degree, or a career goal to be able to advance my job, earn more money, to be able to cover my expenses on time. Or my strategy might have me focus on more of like a financial management goal in the financial management domain, really looking at my cash flow, my monthly cash flow, creating a budget, making sure that I'm setting aside some funds to ensure that the rent is paid on time. So I think in that way, like the bridge itself, you can see how all of these domains really are interconnected and interrelated and impact each other. And then lastly, the bridge is really designed to also be future oriented. So the idea is that you're moving up the domains or up the pillars and really helping, I think, in that coaching relationship to help someone plan ahead, strategize, think about where to focus on first. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk about the third essential element of mobility mentoring, which is goal setting. And coaches work really closely with residents to support them in taking some of their long-term sort of hopes, dreams, goals, and breaking them down into much smaller actionable bites, really strategizing on where can we begin today, make concrete steps towards that longer term vision. So what can we do today, next week, the next 2 weeks, the next time we meet, really bite size. And you'll see on the goal action plan that residents will use this form to help work with their coach to be able to set goals. And their goals are SMART, so specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. And we put that intentionally on the form so that it's front of mind when you're creating goals. It also, the form is designed to reinforce that intrinsic motivation by asking why. Like, why is this goal important to me? And it helps people to begin to think about those possible challenges that might come up as you're trying to pursue their goal. So at the very bottom of the form, you'll see there's a question around what are those possible challenges that might come up and some strategies to overcome it. And so coaches can use this form to really engage in these coaching conversations and really help people think about not only the goals and the action steps to create the goal, but how might you potentially recognize some challenges and create those strategies to overcome if and when those do arise. So in the beginning, I'd say with goal setting, coaches might help someone set 1 or 2 short-term goals that can be accomplished over a week or 2. But over time, it's really important that as people get successful in that goal setting process and really experience those wins, that the goals should become progressively longer term, more complex over time. And so as goals are achieved, coaches recognize and celebrate all the perseverance, the persistence, the hard work that residents have made to be able to achieve their goal. And that's going to lead us to the next slide, which is the 4th and final element of mobility mentoring model, and that's recognition. Recognition is, we see it as key in acknowledging the work that residents have done, and it demonstrates, I think, our belief in their future accomplishments. And recognition, it can come in many forms. I think on the slide before, you saw that at the very bottom of the slide, we were giving an earned incentive of $25 for that person to complete their goal. And $25 would be a way to recognize somebody, but it doesn't have to be cash or gift cards. It could be certificates of achievement. It could be celebrations. It could be letters, shout outs at community meetings. There's a lot of ways that you can help recognize the great work that people are putting to achieve their goals. And it's really intended to reinforce a very positive sense of self. So we see you as someone who is setting out to plan and achieve your goal and accomplish it. And we think it helps to provide a little extrinsic motivation to stay persistent toward these longer term goals, these big goals that people have. And at the same time, I think it helps to bolster and reinforce their own intrinsic motivation in achieving those goals. And so the next slide, you'll see that all of these 4 elements that come together to compromise the mobility mentoring model. And I'm going to drop in the chat. I'll drop in a link to our, oh, actually, I'm sorry, my link isn't working, but I will drop in the chat a link to our impact report, which shows some of the outcomes that folks have been able to achieve over time with mobility mentoring. And in some cases, we were able to benchmark those against the larger community. And so, as Nina had mentioned, EMPath, we have a global network of providers that we train and collaborate with, we learn from, so that we could collectively evolve this model of mobility mentoring, right? We're continuously trying to learn how to improve it and ultimately share best practices of what works in supporting people. And we call this network the Economic Mobility Exchange, very intentionally, the exchange as in the exchange of ideas and practices. And in the next slide, you'll see that we have a number of different organizations that are part of the network. There's over 1,000 from all different sectors, from housing, early childhood, foster care, higher education. This screen just shows a little bit of the organizations represented, including the community builders, which we'll hear from in a moment. And in the next slide, you'll see some of the ways that we're able to support organizations in learning about the mobility mentoring model, how to train up their staff, how to help them with design and implementation and really rolling out this model in their offering, and really how to support some long-term ongoing learning opportunities for staff. Like you see on the screen, there's actually, we do have a regular subgroup of members that connect over discussing how mobility mentoring shows up in best practices within the housing sector. So we found that we were having an increasing number of housing organizations join, and we wanted to find a space for them to be able to connect and practice with each other. So I think that is it. And we'll take some comments at the end. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jennifer. That was so helpful and informative. And now we're going to pass it off to Ishmael to talk a bit about what this has looked like in practice.
Good afternoon, everyone. And Mina, thank you so much for the opportunity to share. The Community Builders, Inc., or TCB, our initiative is Our Doors to Yours, and it's a 2-year initiative structured to create a clear pathway to wealth building for BIPOC families. We do that through engaging tools like rent reporting for credit building. What we find is that most people pay their rent on time, and we want to use that as a tool to help our residents build the credit score needed to pursue homeownership if that is what they desire. We have escrow savings accounts. We find that typically the average resident that we have here has no savings or maybe has a savings with a minimum of $5. So we have been looking at ways to create that habit or what we call money saving behavior with our residents. We offer down payment assistance. We connect families with down payment assistance programs in our community. And then we have affordable housing programs that we connect our residents with that offer homeownership classes and also help them prepare for the homeownership journey. Next slide. So now Our Doors to Yours is funded by a contract that was awarded by Fannie Mae, and we engage industry professionals, local community partners in mobilizing programs that are driven towards financial education, coaching, again, wealth building tools that usher the residents in the journey towards economic stability and ultimately homeownership. With the rent reporting, as I shared, we are doing this not only in Richmond, but in Detroit and Chicago. We do this by using outreach. So outreach and programming are the arms and legs of Our Doors to Yours. Our Doors to Yours is just that. We actually get on the ground, we knock on doors, we interact with our residents, we build relationship and rapport with them so that the coaching process is more of a relationship rather than an appointment or traditional coaching where they give information and we disseminate technique. It's teaching them how to manage their finances and giving them the front seat in their journey to financial stability and financial wealth building. Next slide. So now the EMPath Bridge to Self-Sufficiency tool is critical when conducting coaching sessions with our residents. This tool has transformed how TCB's financial programs coordinators relate to the residents. We empower them to shape their own future, starting with what matters to them the most. And then we celebrate small victories. So we set small, achievable goals so that we can celebrate those victories. And then those small victories is what give them momentum to tackle those more challenging things. The coaching model provides a lens that allows the coach and the residents to have a high definition view of their current circumstances, ensuring that they can make the decision that's best for their household and for their well-being. We utilize the resident events and the outreach to establish a foundation for future coaching sessions. So this is where we get their contact information and we sit down and we talk to them about their concerns. We get to know their families. The events and the outreach are the arms and legs that allow our team members to reach out and meet the residents where they are. We engage residents with programming. So we have different programmings with community partners that will come out and do home buyers workshop. We partner with residents who do workshops on credit repair, things that will educate them and equip them with the tools they need to move forward at whatever stage that they may be, but to also build camaraderie, to let them know that we are not just here to, clock in and clock out, but we are fully engaged in the process and in their well-being. The empath bridge to self-sufficiency, it focuses on the 5 major areas, and I say of our lives because as much as we're helping the residents, I can say being a single mother and having children, that it speaks to my life as well and how important these pillars are to us in order for us to have stability. So when we look at the areas of family stability and well-being, financial management, education and training, employment and career, for the residents, this means helping them view their life from an economically stable standpoint and showing them what it looks like to be stable without having the need for the support of the government. This is oftentimes something that they dream of, but don't believe that can be a reality. And the bridge to self-sufficiency pretty much allows us to have a conversation that breaks that big picture that may seem overwhelming and break it into small pieces to where we can deal with it one step at a time. And it helps them to feel like it's something that they can accomplish, that they can be stable, that they can be economically sufficient. We as a team have to dismantle the traditional coaching model. So we as a team, we come together, we talk about events that we can do that speak to the community and their needs. We have different partnerships that help residents with food. Many of the population needs assistance with food, childcare, healthcare. So we partner and network with these community partners to not only focus on the homeownership and finances, but we holistically have to put these things together along with using the 5 pillars and the bridge to self-sufficiency to bring this all together. One thing I can say in closing is that the bridge to self-sufficiency for me has made it truly a relationship building tool. You hear individuals say relationship building tool, and it's not as relational as we believe it should be, because when you get to a certain point in the conversation, it kind of ends. Where here, you go with them through the process. It's like we're holding their hand and helping them achieve their goal with them in the driver's seat. And so I appreciate the opportunity to take this roadmap in this journey with the residents that we serve. Next slide. You can visit our website to view more information about Our Doors to Yours. And thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thanks so much, Ishmael. I think that was really insightful as well, hearing you talk about this being a part of building relationships with residents and centering residents throughout the process. And I think that's a great transition to our final presenter, Kevin, who's going to talk a bit about Operation Pathways and their journey focusing on a family-centered coaching model. So I'll pass it over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Mina, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about our journey into the family-centered coaching model. And you're going to hear some of the same things you've heard from the previous 2 speakers about the process. But I'm gonna talk about it from a perspective of kind of who we are as an organization, who we were, and who we wanted to be. And so I usually start these conversations with sharing a story. Kind of back in 2018, we were looking at our programs and services and trying to figure out how we could have a greater impact on our community. And it wasn't that we weren't doing good work. It wasn't that, we weren't helping people. We had after-school programs and programs for seniors, and things were going, but we felt like we really we didn't have the sort of the connection to the community that we needed to have. And so we began to investigate options to try to help us to get more connected to the folks that we serve. And we came across this family-centered coaching opportunity. And as we came across the opportunity, we started to really look at who we were and what we were doing, and asking ourselves some pretty difficult questions. And then personally, for me, in my own professional life at that time, I had been a nonprofit for a very long time, and I wanted to make more impact on community, and we're looking for something to kind of help us to cross that bridge. And so we stumbled into family-centered coaching and met with the folks from the Prosperity Agenda who trained us in this approach to services. But the bigger part about this approach was we realized that every aspect of what we did as an organization was focused on what we thought was best, what the research said was best. And we hadn't really had conversations really with residents to see what they wanted, right? And I always tell people, you can identify need through demographics, through surveys, through those types of things. You can identify need, But just because you identify a need, if you're not having a conversation to see what people want, you might be missing the boat, because some people have needs that's not, we see as a need, and they see as not a pressing thing for them, right? And so you want to make sure that you're having the conversations with your community members, so that you really gauge who they are and what they want. And so I usually do these types of sessions where I ask this question. Obviously, I'm gonna answer this question, but usually ask people kind of what's the purpose of whatever it is. So in this case, it's resident service, affordable housing, whatever type of work you do. And at the center of whatever you do, whether you're a lawyer, whether you own a retail store, whether you do affordable housing, the center of what we're doing is people, right? And so we have to make sure we're connecting ourselves to people and their voices. And we've done, I think we've attempted to do a better job at connecting with folks and what they're saying, listening to folks. But I always tell our team is that we want to hear what people say, take action on that, what they said, and then be transparent with them when we can't move something that they desire, or if we're stuck. Why are we stuck? Because I think one of the things that we do, particularly to disenfranchised communities, is we'll come around like it's political season, right? So politicians are going everywhere, right? Talking to people, going to churches, whatever, trying to connect with community. And they'll make promises, and then they'll go away. Very little will change, right? And then they'll come back every 4 years or 2 years or 6 years or whatever the cycle is and do the same thing. People will share their heart, share what their goals are, what their visions are from these communities, and we don't really listen. And so we wanted an approach to services where we actually took into account what people wanted. And, you know, for me, one of the things that was important, Dr. King talked about the beloved community. And in the beloved community, we could converse, we can talk, we can disagree, but the idea is that we're working toward the greater good for the whole community. And our approach to this work is sort of based with that in mind. Next slide, please. And so what we decided and what we understand is that in people's lives, the people in our own lives and the people we serve lives, systems have failed people, right? And particularly folks who have been disenfranchised or have been marginalized by society, have been failed by society. Sometimes that's their own personal relationships, educational systems, governmental systems, financial systems, and I could have put 10, 20 more systems in here, right? Where people feel more like when I engage with a system doesn't care about me. And what I always tell our team and folks is that we're also a part of that system. Human services, resident services, we're a part of the system that has failed people historically, right? And so when we engage with our community members, we have to understand if they've been hurt, if they've been disappointed, if they've been let down by systems, they're listening to you and they're saying yes and shaking their head, but in the back of their mind, they're processing, are you just the next person or system or organization that will fail me in some way or another? And what we realize is with this approach, if we do affordable housing and resident services the right way, right? If we look at this services from the perspective of what our community is speaking to us and what they're wanting from us and with the desire, we can make long-term change in people's lives. And what I've discovered is sometimes we decide what success is. So we'll decide what a safe neighborhood is. We'll decide what economic mobility is. We'll decide what health and wellness. We'll decide all this stuff for people because we have indicators and our boards and funders and all these people want those things. And that's important. I'm not saying it's not important, but sometimes we focus so much on those pieces, we forget to ask the residents, what is a safe community for you? What does that look like? And I share people, I'm from New Orleans and I grew up in a neighborhood some people might have considered a dangerous neighborhood. But to me, it was a beloved community. I knew my neighbors. My parents knew my neighbors. People would tell my mom if I was doing something, right? It was a very close-knit, beloved community. And I felt safe in it, even though somebody else driving in the neighborhood might feel terrified. And so we have to actually figure out what are the goals and objectives people want for their own lives and help to build that as we work with them. And this approach allows us to do that. Next slide, please. So the family-centered coaching approach was developed with support of the Kellogg Foundation. It's a set of tools and resources, what have you, to help organizations, human service organizations, and others to engage with families who are experiencing poverty. And when I read this, I always tell folks, this is the standard definition, but I think it's even more than. I think you can use this approach. I use it with my family, I use it with my friends, I use it with our partners. It's an approach that you can use with anybody, but specifically it was designed to work with families who were experiencing poverty. And it's a partnership with the folks you're serving, right? And it helps people decide what's important for them and set goals that they desire to set and work toward the things that's going to help them to build long-term success through like Jennifer said earlier, like as they accomplish things to celebrate and build the skills and tools they want and need to accomplish more in their life. Next slide, please. It's based on 3 foundational principles, which we teach to our staff. Trauma-informed care, which if you've been in human services, we all know what that is. Basically, we all have experienced traumas that impact the way we make choices and decisions. Obviously, depending on your economic background or race, other factors, in some cases, and gender, all those things can impact of trauma. We have to understand that when we engage with the people we serve. They talked earlier about executive skills, and that the biggest part here is that sometimes there's a diagram we show sometimes, the old diagram of what success is and what people think success is. And oftentimes the people that we serve feel that because they haven't made great decisions or their life hasn't been great, they can't change that, right? It's kind of like if I've made choices that haven't led to the right road, I can't change that. And what we encourage our residents to see is that no matter what choices you've made in the past, you can make new choices tomorrow, right? But it's up to you. You have to decide if you want to, or if you desire to, and that they have the power to change their lives if they so desire, the goals, whatever, achieve things. Behavioral economics basically explains why we do what we do. What I like to use this to share with people is we don't put judgment on people's choices for their own lives. It's your life. You get to choose what you want to do with it, right? And just like you make choices every day, I use an example sometimes, I like to eat sweets, I like to bake and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes I eat too many sweets, and my wife and my doctor and others might not be happy with that. But I still do it because I want to do it, right? Residents have the same opportunity to make those choices. And you all make those choices. You go shopping when you probably shouldn't, you take that vacation when you really probably shouldn't. And nobody judges you for that. So we shouldn't judge the people we serve for the choices and decisions they decide to make for their own lives. And so that's an important principle to this approach. Next slide. So this is called the 7 assumptions of coaching relationship. You already heard the first one from the first 2 presenters. We believe all of our residents are capable, creative, and resourceful. That means everybody. No matter what their lot in life, no matter what their educational level, no matter what the situation is, they have the skills they need to figure out life. And I always tell people, if you're still alive and breathing, you've done something to figure out life. Like you every day you wake up, you've done something to figure this thing out. And so you're capable of doing things, even if you don't believe you are. And we try to help people to see that. We focus on folks' strengths and not weaknesses. Historically in this field, we a lot of times focused on weaknesses. What's the weaknesses of the community? What's the things that aren't there? We try to say, hey, let's focus on what are the strengths, because you can build on those strengths and do wonderful things through that. I know there's a situation where one of my RSCs had a resident who had a hoarding issue, and she would buy all this new stuff and put it in her apartment or what have you. And so she was able to coach her and let her and see how that could be used as a strength. And, the lady had worked in retail. She figured out how to buy stuff for cheap. And so she ended up donating some of the stuff that she was hoarding in her apartment. And then her and the RSC worked on a plan that when she wanted to go shop, like, do you have some place you want this stuff to go to, right? All those things that are positives. But if we just focus on the fact she's a hoarder and not see what the potential is there, that's a strength, right? She knew how to find things very cheaply, brand new stuff, that she just was putting in her apartment and she had a thing to do with it. We saw that as a strength, and we switched that thing so that she could see that the strength she had, that it wasn't a challenge, it was a strength, and we'd have to learn to recognize that. Coaches help to create environments where change is possible. Change ripples outward. The idea basically is that if people have success in one area or they recognize their strengths, they can build on that and start to make decisions in other area. These last two are pretty important. As coaches, you have to realize that change happens different from different people. So you got to be patient. You can tell me something and I might do it tomorrow. You might tell somebody else, it might take them 10 years, right? As a coach, you need to be patient with the process because we're different. I always have said, you know, we have our educational systems, we have these grades and everybody moves together at the same pace. But the reality of it is we're all individual learners, right? And what we learn and what we retain and what we move is very different. And so sometimes we try to put everybody on the same track, and that's not the reality of life, right? So you're being mindful of that. And then the last part of this assumption, these assumptions, is that you meet people where they are. Or another way we saw this is you tailor the approach to the individual. So, or to the community. We figure out what people need and want, and then we try to approach them from that perspective so they don't feel as if they've lost anything. Some benefits of this approach is an equity approach. So if you're looking to do something where you're looking equity is important, it's an equity approach to resident engagement. It empowers residents to be in control. We're not in control, they're in control. It helps residents see their strengths. We talked about that earlier. And then it shifts the responsibility of choice away from others into the resident, this is part I really love because it becomes their choice. It's their decision. They realize they have that choice and decision. And so that's power. And when we talk about equity, equity is making sure people understand they have power and they can use that power. And making choices of power we all want. And the same thing with our residents. And a benefit to your staff, it reduces the burden of an emotional strain of feeling like when you old school case management, you kind of were making charts with people and telling them what they should do and shouldn't do. And if they went and did something that you told them to do that you thought was going to be successful and it didn't work, you had that responsibility, right? In this case, it's their choice. They get to choose. They get to try it. And then we unpack it once it's done. And so it's a way to reduce that burden on your staff. So a big part of this is we had to, as an organization, change the way we thought, right? And we use the term a lot. We need to change our DNA, right? We were an organization that was driven by us dictating things to community, and well-intentioned. So I'm not saying that we were doing the wrong things, but I think the approach was off a little bit, and we switched it to what does the community want. So if we have an opportunity for certain grants and funding, we go to community first and say, hey, we have this grant for this program. Would you guys be interested in this? And we unpack that and talk to the folks about that, right? We've seen more residents participate in services as volunteers in their community because it was something they wanted. And we realized in the past, we would get, outside volunteers most of the time. We never thought about, hey, we have these residents who want to do this. Residents have connected us to resources and services. Residents have made donations, right? It's totally shifted the way that we process the work that we did. And these are just pictures of some of those interactions there. Next slide. So, when Mina asked me to talk about our process, I really didn't know how to do this because we had about 10, 15 minutes. And so the easiest way for me to do this, I just made these quick little buckets here to talk about kind of keywords for us. So we had a pain point, we need to make a change. And we focused on that. We have to be open and critical about ourselves. We worked to get our team to buy into this approach. We went to them first before we brought it to the community and saw if they had an interest in it. We created peer leadership opportunities for folks. We were going through a strategic plan, which allowed us to do things like change our mission and vision to fit this new coaching approach. We created an in-house training where we train staff, and it's now part of our onboarding. So, we do recertifications in coaching with staff. So we really built this into who we are as an organization. And then we're constantly in conversations with ourselves on ways we can layer coaching, and so we can hold ourselves accountable. We're in meetings sometimes and, talking about a new initiative or something, and somebody reminds us, hey, what about the residents? What about coaching? How does this fit in? So we do things to try to hold ourselves accountable. And then we celebrate, as was said earlier, when we have success in the work that we do. So this is all part of it. And then the next slide. These are just some outcomes. And I want to indicate here, this is from 2020 to 2023. And so obviously that was COVID happening part of this. So when we look at these numbers, resident volunteers, the hours they've given to their community, residents who are in coaching relationships. We did an activity called Community Vision Board, where we came together and made a vision board for our residents in the communities that they told us what they wanted. We're working toward that, and we've trained staff on it. But just a snapshot into this, I just ran a report before this meeting. So from January to May of this year, we've had 101 residents volunteer, and they've donated over 1,800 hours of time to their community in various ways. And so it helps us, this approach we've discovered, it gives our staff and it gives them extra human resources, right? Because residents are running programs. The picture on the opening slide, I had an opportunity to visit our site in the Bronx for a Father's Day event. And I went there, I had my OP shirt on and my shorts, and I was ready to work. And literally, I was sitting in the office waiting, and residents were coming, doing stuff, and I didn't know what was going on. And then finally, I asked the RSC, I said, when are we going to set up? And she said, Kevin, the residents they've done it. They've done everything. We just have to show up. And I walked into the event, it was all set up. They had put up the OP stuff. It was, and they were cooking, it was doing everything. It was amazing. And it just showed me that this approach, the impact of this approach, and residents came up and said, hey, we feel more involved now because of this. And so I'm going to, got one more slide, I think, because I think I'm over time. This is more information if you want to contact me or the Prosperity Agenda, the people we receive training for. That's the information there. And thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Kevin. I really appreciate that. And there's a lot of really great information packed in there. I'm sure we have some questions from folks too for all of our presenters. So we're going to transition over to some time for Q&A. So if you have questions, please put them in that chat, the Q&A chat, not the participant chat. Give folks a moment for that. It looks like we do, maybe Kevin, you can answer this quickly. We have a question about incentives. Do you provide any kind of incentives for folks?
Yeah, so we do encourage our RSCs to have incentives for residents who volunteer their time. We became a big believer in the last few years of if people are volunteering their time, you should reward that, whatever that looks like. So sometimes that's a special dinner, sometimes that's gift cards, sometimes it's some type of thank you, but we do take the time out to thank people for volunteering and making sure that we recognize that.
Great. And I want to open it up to the group. We do have another question related to, I think, the similarities and differences between these person-centered coaching models and maybe more traditional case management. So how do these strategies align, differ? Do they work together? So I would love to hear maybe starting with Ishmael, sort of what that approach looks like for you all, how it may differ or relate to case management.
So with case management, we, take in information, and after we assess the information, we come up with a plan and disseminate it to the individual we're coaching, and they implement that plan. Well, with the person-based coaching model, it's more personal. It's where we take in the information, and yes, we have tools and resources to assist them. However, the goal is to get them to start thinking about their future, thinking about the process, thinking about how it's important to them so that they're more engaged versus us saying, this is my knowledge, here you go, take this and run with it. Now they feel empowered to make the decision. They're processing the information that we're giving to them, and then they're using the tools, and then they'll check in with us and say, hey, what do you think about this? Yes, it sounds like this. And then I may say, well, maybe let's think about this. So it makes it more of I am taking the information, giving it to them, and then confirming them or affirming the decision that they make. And it's not a negative approach. We're saying, no, that's not good. It's more of saying, if they say something that may cause a little concern, you say, let's think about it this way, and give them some more options so that they feel empowered to make a decision for their future.
Great. Jennifer, did you want to say something as well?
Yeah, no, I'm just nodding along because when I started my career back in the mid-90s, I was a case manager, and I know for me this approach feels very different in that it's that partnership where you're really truly trying to partner with somebody and supporting them in helping to strategize with them instead of what I think is a more traditional case management model. So yeah, no, I ditto Ishmael with what you shared.
It looks like we have another question, and I think I want to broaden it a bit, but what's one piece of advice you all would give to an organization that's maybe just beginning to explore integrating person-centered coaching into their resident services, or sort of looking at this process? How can they sort of start that process?
I'll jump in. I know for us, the whole coaching approach is you're going to people. So for one of the things that we did before we even talked about it with the community or anybody, we went to the staff first. And we said, hey, we're looking at this approach. We had somebody come in and talk about it. We got feedback from staff. And so I thought that was important because that's the coaching model, right? You don't just go in and say, hey, we're doing this. You start the conversation, and it starts with a conversation with your staff team. And then I think leadership really has to buy in, and because it has to be top down. So you have to understand if you're not coaching, your staff isn't going to be coaching. They're not going to buy it. So you have to like agree to do that as an organization.
And I would just add to that. So what we did here in Richmond, we actually did the process ourselves. So we actually went through the exercise, went through the forms, and put ourselves in the seat of the actual resident, so that we role played. And so it was important for us to understand what the other person feels like sitting in the seat going through this process. And so in doing so and actually filling out the forms, it allows us to have the patience that we need to actually go through the process, because some will get it right away and they'll go through streamline, and then others, it'll take a long time for them to even put their feet in the water to get it wet to even want to initiate, the first pillar. So us being able to have that time together as a team to use the tools and talk about the tools and how we felt having the conversations, because to be honest, talking about money is an intimate thing. And it can be overwhelming when you start talking about the whole picture. So it kind of helped us to take a step back so that we could have a more personal approach to how we coach.
I would just like to emphasize, I think what Kevin shared of making sure you're bringing residents and staff into those early conversations to help shape and, influence how you're going to move forward. And also I would invest, if coaching is where you want to move towards, invest in that training and support, trauma-informed, approaches, motivational interviewing, whatever coaching approach that you take, make sure that you take the time where it's not a one and done training, but that's supported also through supervision, so that supervisors have the tools and the time to be able to support their staff and really model that coaching approach.
Great. Are there ways in which you all are thinking about that workflow for staff and systems of accountability to this model?
So I know for us, we've in a style talk about made a part of our DNA, right? So coaching is a part of our language now. It's a part of our outcomes. It's a part of our training. It's a part of our monthly calls. Like everything that we do has a coaching lens to it. And so I will say when we first started it, if you have staff who've been doing this work for a long time, it's a shift, right? And that shift isn't easy. I've discovered it's been the hardest for folks who've been doing traditional case management to make the shift to coaching. But over time they get it, right? It's just you believe in it, you hold people accountable. We've included in the goals for our staff. So you have coaching like related goals, resident engagement, resident volunteer goals, because we want to make sure that we're constantly thinking about this and getting feedback from our community.
And I would say TCB is similar. So as far as our resident engagement, as I said, our outreach is a big part of that. So making sure we're tracking our outreach, who's coming, who's participating, the information that they share, coming together as coordinator, talking about our victories, and then some of the things that may not have gone so great. So tracking the successes and the failures, and then regrouping, and then going back out and just trying different techniques, because each community is different, is what we're learning. So our tracking has to be able to evolve as we discover what works and what doesn't work. So it allows us, of course, to adapt to the residents that we serve, because each demographic is going to be different.
Really helpful.
I think that's a great point, Ishmael, too, because we have the same thing. And actually, in our last board meeting, I had a similar question, but it's every community. We're in 30 different communities, whatever it is, 32 communities. They're different, right? And depending on where they're at in the country, depending on if it's a multifamily site, if it's a senior site. And the thing that this approach does, it does allow you to really mesh what people want on the ground, right? And so we do have what I call portfolio-wide initiatives that we do that we've always done, and we still do those things. But this allows you to really hone in on what's important in Stamford, Connecticut versus Houston, Texas, right? And so it's a really, really great approach in that.
I do want to tie that just quickly. So when you're thinking about, measuring success of these initiatives, what does that look like for you all? What measurements are you looking at, especially when this may not align with some of those traditional measures that you look to?
Okay, I can take that one. I can say for our Doors to Yours, it's initiating the process, because majority of the residents aren't thinking about financial wellness or things of that nature. They are thinking about other things. Oftentimes they're focused on getting food with their family, and that's the focus, and everything else is pushed aside. So, what this does is allows us to kind of help them with that need, and then bring in other aspects that may assist them in making that need, as well as others, be met at the same time or simultaneously, so that we're working on a homogeneous process that brings everything together for them. I think that with that being said, the residents gets the full value of the process and what we're doing.
And I think with the mobility mentoring model, some of the tools that you saw, the bridge, like we measure movement up each of the domains of the bridge. We measure goals set and achieved, goal achievement rates. We measure confidence, right? I think a big part of coaching, whatever coaching model it is really helping to instill confidence. And so there's measures of confidence that you can track.
And I would say that, we have some of the measures that I share, but one of the things we're in the process of doing is doing some research on this approach to see what are the other impacts, like belonging, people feeling closer, those types of things. And I think as a houser, those things are important. Do you feel safer? Do you feel more connected because of this approach? So we hope to have some more information on that soon.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We're about at time right now, but I think this was a really fruitful conversation. I know we have quite a number of questions, so we'll try to answer some of those and follow up as well. If you're interested in learning about future webinars or resources shared, I encourage you to check out our CORE's resource library and the newsletter. We have a number of resources, including those focused on centering resident voice and agency in this work, which I'm sharing here. But thank you all again for attending, and thank you to our wonderful panelists for all of this amazing information for folks either starting this process or looking for ways to hold themselves accountable or track the impact of this work. So thank you all.